He is the head of India operations of Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. ICANN is well known. Samiran has been with the consulting and business advisory practice for ICANN India. He has worked extensively in sectors with multinationals in telecom, entertainment, payment systems, e-commerce, social media, energy and renewables, and so on. And he has been actively promoting the multi-stakeholder community model of ICANN. As you are probably aware, ICANN has been transitioning from the US Department of Commerce mentoring model to a multi-stakeholder community model, and Samiran has been actively involved in promoting the multi-stakeholder involvement of all stakeholders, regular users like you and me, industry, communities, government, especially the government within India, quite actively. In fact, we should congratulate Samiran for bringing ICANN 57, second conference of ICANN, to India. It's going to be held in November in Hyderabad. So thanks to Samiran that has happened, and then we welcome you, Samiran, for your keynote speech.
The interesting thing is, and I'm going to digress from what I was going to say because I learned so much this morning, is that a lot of what I heard was actually, in a sense, the same conversation around the multi-stakeholder model. Okay? So I'm just going to read out from some of the things that I heard. First thing in the morning, Professor Sadagopan said that there's need for internet governance. We don't know exactly what it might be, but there's really need for something to happen. We've heard a lot about language capabilities and computing, and using the internet in different Indian languages. This is something that we at ICANN are working very closely with the communities in India. We are trying to get the Indian communities, and I'll explain how that works, to help us develop the DNS system into local languages, the domain name system. The other thing is, Ma'am Reddy, I don't think she's in the room right now. She had this very interesting observation that various people are working on development, ICT development, but we end up working in silos and we are not actually working together. So again, the need for the multi-stakeholder kind of level of working. And finally, there was another point somebody made, I think Ishwar, right, made around the great net neutrality example and how free basics was defeated. Now that was multi-stakeholderism in action. Okay. Now the only difference between that and what I'm going to speak about is that was almost very spontaneous. There was campaign and counter campaign, and views got coalesced on both sides, and one side won. Okay, at ICANN, this model has been working over the last 15-20 years. Now, firstly, the question I ask is, who runs the internet? Over 3.5 billion people are connected to the internet as of June this year. Unofficial data points to about 467 million Indians being connected. Now, we also heard Mr. Pani very lucidly stating that we have 3% usage versus over 400 million people connecting. So, and therefore there's a mismatch. But the fact is, these are real numbers. Okay. Now, who actually runs the internet is a great question, because the internet is not run by any one entity. Okay. Those in the United States where the internet came into being, and those from certain political affiliations, without naming parties, would tend to believe that the United States government runs the internet for the rest of the world. That in fact is not the case. Okay. Now, what is Internet governance, therefore? Internet governance is the development and application of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and the use of the Internet. Now, this is a very nice textbook definition that I believe the Internet Society, ISOC, created at some point in time. It gives you a nice, clean overview. The reality is slightly more complex. So I'm going to show you this diagram. In our world, when I say our world, that is my world in ICANN, we look at our world in 3 layers. Right at the bottom is the green layer, which is the infrastructure layer. That's where the telcos are, that's where the networks are, that's where, you know, the fat pipes under the sea, terrestrial networks, satellite networks, all of that reside, okay? In the middle is what we call the logical layer, okay? The logical layer is where ICANN is, but I'll come back to that a little later, but that's what we do there is simply connect the users who are in the blue layer on top, that's you and me, all of us in the room, to the infrastructure. If you now look at the top layer, the blue layer, you know, if you look at the graphic over there and think of everything over there with an IP address attached, whether it's telemedicine, whether it's education, whether it's governance, okay, whether it's an IoT device that you wear on your wrist to track how many steps you've taken, all of those have IP addresses, okay? If you look at, in fact, the telecom sector, a lot of networks today run on IP switching, okay? And that's why you will see there's a subtle change in color where we talk about the internet backbone between the orange and the green layer, indicating that both are part of the backbone, okay? So I'm going to take a little time to talk about how the logical layer of digital governance actually works. And this is the example of the multi-stakeholder model. ICANN just doesn't sit and make decisions on, oh, you know, when you go to a web, where you type in a web address and you know, you get an error 44, it was something that was just made up by somebody at ICANN and says, okay, you know, error 44 means that this page is not available. It didn't happen that way. That's a protocol parameter which there are people who are involved, and all the stakeholders are listed over there who have, let me see if I can use this, yeah. If you see the top layer over there, those are the communities right on top over here who are involved in ICANN to help create policy, okay? So essentially what happens is policy specification and standards development take place by community members. ICANN as an entity actually implements them. So we don't create the policy, but it is the stakeholders who are involved create the policies, and we are entrusted with implementing them. When there are successes, we don't hear of them. When there are failures, we get the brickbats. Okay, so but that's okay. And how does the internet work? I'm sure many of you in the room would know there's a series of root servers and their mirrors. It's a highly distributed system so that redundancies are built in many times, and it's very difficult today to crash the internet, as it were. You can crash a telecom network, but you may not be able to crash the internet because it's just been replicated and created and multiplied. The network is in that manner. So the reason all of this has happened over the last 15-20 years is because, in fact, there has been no government intervention per se. Now, I have to be very careful. I have a former diplomat in the room. Government has played a very strong role in a different manner. It was only in the early 2000s, when at the United Nations, okay, leaders of countries started talking about the internet as a development tool. The fact that they needed, they wanted to understand what is this phenomena called the internet. So in 2003, the first World Summit on Information Society, or WSIS, meeting was held in Geneva. That meeting didn't go down very well. The popular belief was it was the United States versus the rest of the world in that meeting. Okay. However, the next meeting in 2005, which was held in Tunis, really captured the imagination of country states, and nations who were part of the United Nations system. And even India's ICT policy sort of enshrines what is known as the Tunis agenda. There are certain ICT objectives and goals which are enshrined in India's policymaking when it comes to ICT. Governments also realized at that point that much of the development that had taken place in the world of internet had taken place in the private sector, and they realized that because that was a sort of permissionless innovation taking place, they should really not try and impede that, and therefore the United Nations also set up another body called the Internet Governance Forum, or the IGF, which meets on a regular basis. So I just wanted to balance out this discourse that we're having here today, because I didn't want you to think that it's only the I-star entities or those in the logical layer who are concerned with the internet. No, even the United Nations has played a role, and they continue to play a role. But when it comes to the pure play technology, it is the I-star institutions which call the shots. Two principles, and there could be others, but the two core principles is that the first principle is that of participation. You cannot be a stakeholder without participating. And it's it's a challenge sometimes, because the response that a lot of people will have is that, look, I would want to participate, but I can't go to an ICANN meeting. It costs money. I don't have so much time, and I don't want to. I'm not in a position to spend some money to do that. Today, what has happened, that has been addressed by technology. At least all ICANN meetings. I don't know about IGF as much. IGF not so much, but certainly all ICANN and most of IETF meetings, Internet Engineering Task Force meetings, are broadcast on the internet. You can actually go into meeting rooms and attend them live. Okay, and you can, and not only attend, but you can contribute. You can actually speak, or you can type in your comments, and they'll be read out. So that provision is there. But the first principle is of stakeholder participation. The second principle is that of decision by consensus. This animal called the multi-stakeholder model is not a pretty looking animal. Everybody does not leave the room after a meeting all happy. Everybody gives up something for consensus to be formed. And we'll go through some more examples of this in the course of the next 10 minutes or so. So essentially, that's broadly how the internet has been managed over the last 15-20 years, since it became open to the public in 1998, broadly. Now, in 1998, and I'm skipping some timeline over here, because I would imagine many people in the room know how the internet was created. If anybody raises a hand and says that I don't know, I'll be very happy to take 2 minutes and explain. Anybody who's not clear, I'm happy to. Okay, 2 hands, I'll do it. So way back in 1957 and 1958, there was a Russian rocket which went to space called the Sputnik. And all it did was it orbited the Earth and just sent back radio signal and nothing else. But those signals could be picked up from any country in the world. The Americans called it, or sociologists in America called it the Sputnik shock, because the Americans suddenly realized the Russians were ahead in some kind of technology development race. For that point in time, they didn't even know they were in a race, but it so happened that they were. So they created an entity which was acronymed DARPA. DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects is DARPA. Now DARPA is where a lot of new technology developments were taking place. In 1969, they started working on the idea of sending packets of information on a network. And that by 1973, they were able to connect, and when I say they, I'm talking about DARPA in the United States of America, were able to connect educational institutions on the West Coast, such as Stanford Research Institute and various others, to institutions on the East Coast. And some of them were military and army defense services installations on both ends. Finally, that networking capability went across the seas into the UK and the Netherlands, and eventually into Japan. Okay, so this was the formation of the internet. There are 4 key people who were involved in the early stages. They were all American: Bob Kahn, Vint Cerf, John Postel, and Steve Crocker. Steve Crocker currently is the chairman of ICANN. There was another gentleman who showed up from England a little later, and he actually created the browser. That's Tim Berners-Lee. Okay, and it was only after the browser was created, you had HTTP and www, that you and I could easily get on the net and start browsing, and therefore the various browsers came into existence thereafter. So we now cut to 1998. Okay. That's when Google was formed, and that's when the US government, which was doing this research, there was a lot of pressure on the US government by commercial interests in the US to open up 2 areas of research that they were working on. One was biotechnology, and the other was internet. And both were opened up by the act of government decree. However, for the internet, it was very clear that you have names, or rather you have a series of IP addresses which are numbers, and the only way you can memorialize a number is by attaching a name to it. Okay, and you can't have multiple people issuing numbers, so that number issuing system or the name number combination system needs to be unified and kept in one place, and that's how ICANN was created. Okay, so what I'm going to do is quickly jump to what the multi-stakeholder model looks like at ICANN. Lots of acronyms, don't be fazed by them. Even now I need to wake up in the morning and look at a cheat sheet and memorize them from time to time. But essentially what you're seeing is a model of distributed responsibilities. On the left hand side, if you see the colored boxes, all of them except ICANN staff, but if you see the green, blue, purple, these 3, and the mauve one over here below, all of these boxes either represent the business community, the numbers community, people at large, okay, such as ourselves, who are there in groups, who create policy, who propose policy. Okay. All the gray ones on the right hand side are the advisory committees. So those on the left, the colored ones, are the the supporting organizations, and the ones on the right, which are on the gray boxes, such as the Government Advisory Committee, the Internet Engineering Task Force, these are all the advisory committees. Okay, they don't create policy, but they advise the policymakers on policy, and they have violent fights from time to time. It's actually a healthy sign of cohabitation, in a sense, that they don't agree from time to time, and the fact that but the goal is common, to do the right thing for society at large. Now, for example, the Government Advisory Committee has 160 nations represented. It's like a mini United Nations when that committee meets. And they take a lot of critical decisions on various issues. So, we can spend a whole day talking about this, but I just want to let you know that there is a structure in place that companies, individuals, researchers, technologists, all can fit into, startups too, and participate. Right in the middle, bottom, is the nominating committee, which is possibly the most powerful committee amongst all of these, because they get to nominate 8 board members from across the board onto the ICANN board of directors. So they have the option of actually keeping on distributing, and the board representation is proportionate to the regions of the world, largely to that extent. Sometimes there is a mismatch. They try to fix those. So this is what ICANN does. ICANN is responsible for coordination of the global internet unique identifiers. We do not create the policies. The folks involved that you saw create the policy. So our mandate is to make competition and choice available in a safe, secure, and operating environment. And of course, our greater mandate, even beyond that, is to keep the internet secure and resilient. So that's very important. Now, IANA. Yeah, IANA. So that's the IANA transition you're talking about, right?
Internet Assigned Numbering Authority.
It's part of. Okay. Yeah, it's right there, right here. Okay, it's part of ICANN. Okay, but it brings me to the next point, quite frankly, which really is that, as I said, when the internet, when ICANN was created, it was under the US government's oversight, which Sridhar also mentioned. That oversight is coming to an end. It should have come to an end much earlier, but for various political reasons, that process didn't get started till 2014. It's this multi-stakeholder group which created 2 subgroups to create a model which will work without the US government's oversight. Okay, so there were really challenging questions which were asked, such as who will monitor what ICANN does, and how do you actually make sure that ICANN doesn't go out of control, or who will take care of oversight of the staff, and so on and so forth. So a model has been proposed to the US government. If the political process, which is on, and this is a tough year, it's the election year, if hopefully there won't be any major challenges, if everything comes good, as of 1st October this year, ICANN will have no government involvement of any nature at all. In the sense of any oversight by any government, it will be completely independent multi-stakeholder body. Why this is important is, at a certain level, you don't want the internet to be fragmented. You don't want any other nation or any other entity starting to issue IP addresses, because once that happens, you're opening up the risk of blockade, like unilateral censorship. Somebody can say that we won't let any if there were multiples, you could have a situation that we won't let any data flow from, let's say, IPs originating in Electronic City going to the United States or going to Europe. You can actually block that, because that would be under a different system. So we still have a unified system. Where the future goes, we don't know, but the unified DNS system is what we need. Finally, I want to share with you that the ICANN meetings are really, really large. We have people from all over the world who come to these meetings. Some of these meetings go upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 people. The next such meeting is in Hyderabad, 3rd through 9th of November. It would be great to see some of you over there. Registration is obviously free. You can also join remotely. And I'd also like to mention that the two things that we are working on, which is very critical to India, one is language computing. We understand what this problem is, this 3% problem that Mr. Pani spoke about this morning. People are unable to use the internet because it's not available in their language. And we're trying to address that by creating a group over here, which is working on getting the various languages into the root zone, so that those languages, the Indian languages, can be searchable, the script can be recognizable, eventually to have a DNS system which possibly also works in local languages. So this is one. And secondly is the GTLD and IDN programs. Very soon you will be seeing addresses. In fact, on one of the posters, the address, I saw an address called .wine, but you already have like a .hamburg or a .london, for which is very distinctive, but also you'll start seeing .RIL or Tata Motors. If you look at the right hand side of this screen, you'll find the 20 Indian companies who've got their sort of names onto the root zone, and they'll be running very soon. You'll start seeing them coming that way. Essentially, what has happened is over the last 3 years, from about 22 right of the dot extensions, we've gone to about 1227 as of 3rd June this year. We estimate that to go to about 1300, and it creates more choice and competition in this space. Thank you for being here, and if you have any questions, I'm here and I'll be happy to take them later.